Well, Oscar season is upon us once again. We are really close to finding out what the filmmaking industry thinks is the creme of the crop. This year, I was actually able to see 47 of the 53 nominees, which is a new record for me. The only ones I haven't seen yet include The Color Purple, American Symphony, Flaming Hot, Io Capitano, The Eternal Memory, and Four Daughters. But all the other ones, I've seen, including all of the 15 shorts that were nominated. So before we get into what my predictions will be, I want to very briefly rank all of the Oscar-nominated films that I saw, from the worst to the best. And before anyone mentions it, I know that some of these films were nominated in tech categories, and they're not necessarily saying anything about the quality of the overall product, but rather just one element of it. I'm just judging these as films, because at the end of the day, well, that's what they are, films. Alright, sit down, cue the music, and let's speedrun the 47 Oscar-nominated films that I saw. A glorified slideshow presentation that doesn't so much make any kind of argument for its position as it does finger wag without context. What's most hilarious about this is that its plot twist unintentionally undermines the point about abortion that it's trying to make. Oscar bait of the highest caliber. Carey Mulligan is legitimately great, but everything else is overwritten, overdirected, and overacted. If you want to make a short film about dealing with the trauma and grief about a horrific situation, maybe don't film it in such an incompetent way that it becomes unintentionally hilarious. A one-joke premise that wears out its welcome very quickly will make people look back on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and realize that maybe it wasn't as bad as they remembered. Whose bright idea was it to have Happy Xmas War is Over playing over the war action? Some of the battle sequences are cool, but it struggles to maintain narrative thrust, resulting in a bloated, tonally inconsistent clunker. I didn't feel like I learned a thing watching this. The film is visually stunning, and there's moments of artificial enjoyment, but the screenplay and satire is a mess. It makes its point, but then keeps hammering it over and over again to the point of boredom. But there is something nice in watching a community trying to build itself up. If you have to rely on a massive contrivance in order to get your message to work, it's not going to be that effective. I'm sure clips of this will play in history classes across America for decades afterwards. This is perfectly watchable enough, but the lackluster plot and sloppy world-building mistakes keep this from really taking off. A serviceable enough documentary about political turmoil, but doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty about the Ugandan political machine. I was constantly asking, wait, what is happening? And not in a good way. The incredible visual effects barely make this stock, simplistic, sparse story recommendable. This is a weird, visually stunning creation and a portmanteau of Frankenstein and Swiss Army Man, but the rough pacing and meandering themes really hurt it. A surface-level exploration of an important topic, but pales in comparison to works like Persepolis and The Breadwinner. An extraordinary story told in an ordinary way. Full of polish and at its best when it focuses on the inner mechanisms of fixing instruments, but I think streamlining the background stories would have tightened this thing. A film to be respected and admired due to its harrowing subject material, but struggles to connect with the audience on an emotional level. While it is nice to see a more mature Western animated film and the character of Nimona is great, the inconsistent tone and lackluster third act do hurt it. Helen Mirren is transformed into Golda Meir, and the film does a good job at capturing the pressures that she was under, but it can't quite convey the context needed to inflict maximum impact. Pretty well made, but makes its point in the first 5 to 10 minutes, so it really didn't need to be 25 minutes. A technically fine-tuned piece of filmmaking with several fantastic scenes, but emotionally lacking and disjointed. The story could have been trimmed down, but it's comfortable in its own skin, and the relationship between robot and dog really works. I really like that the film doesn't go out of its way to explain what's going on, but rather lets the slow realization wash over you. Ambitious and well animated. A little messy in some parts, but has that old school MCU feel in the best way, and this is a real emotional ride. An unflinchingly honest take on collective and generational trauma, and visually striking animation, although I'm not fully convinced the metaphor completely works. The film struggles to tie together a serious family drama with biting social commentary, but is ultimately buoyed by truly hilarious scenes and an excellent Jeffrey Wright. Equal parts powerful, infuriating, and rage-inducing. This is a compelling work for those that can stomach it, albeit one that probably could have made its point more succinctly. This is really great, and the only way it could have been greater is if it was longer to flesh out the story. A little snapshot of people just living life, a touch of culture, and farting grandmas. What more do you even want? A quiet meditation on growing up, drifting apart, immigration, and wondering what your life could have been. Greta Lee was brilliant and should have been nominated for an Oscar. A visual feast, incredible stakes, great characters, a mastery in tone. Tightening up the pacing would have made this truly fantastic. Watching this is like wearing someone else's skin. A layered story about abuse, trauma, class, as well as the most scathing Hollywood commentary I've seen come out of Hollywood itself. Charles Melton should have been nominated for an Oscar. Left me speechless. A story about an immensely difficult topic that utilizes animation to its fullest potential to show us what the character is feeling as she goes through it. The script is excellent, Sandra Hüller is incredible, and the direction by Justine Triet is top-notch. The longing for simplicity in an age of technology and a subtle yearning for individuality in a more collective society. A compelling character study and as lyrical as a noonday poem. An exhilarating espionage drama with great action set pieces, including an unforgettable climax. Wes Anderson's style is just absolutely perfect for Roald Dahl stories. An exquisite exercise in on-the-ground documentary filmmaking. It's difficult to watch, but you don't want to turn away. An art house film with a capital AF. The film is a slow and methodical examination of evil in its most chillingly passive. The sound work in this film is truly amazing, unlike anything I've ever seen before. Absolutely blew all my expectations out of the water. A fantastic story with wonderful characters, a dark and yet hopeful examination of a post-World War II Japan, and terrifying sequences of raw destruction from Godzilla. The visual effects aren't great in spite of the low budget, they're just great visual effects. Also an examination of evil, but puts a heavy emphasis on the betrayal aspect, which in some ways almost makes it feel worse. This is a slow burn scald that just leaves you feeling so hopeless as to this true American tragedy. Lily Gladstone is absolutely flawless here. The cinematic equivalent of a warm hug. A moving, quiet, charming, and surprisingly funny dramedy and character study. It is entertaining, heartfelt, impeccably made, and filled with excellent performances, including Paul Giamatti, Divine Joy Randolph, and Dominic Sessa. This is everything that I want in storytelling and in film. Alright, now it's time to move on to both my predictions for what I think is going to win, and what my personal picks for the Oscars would be if I was given a ballot. Keep in mind that my predictions aren't necessarily what I want to win, but rather what I think is going to win based on all the information that we have from precursor awards, if there are any. That's what the My Pick section is for. I'll try to let you know if there's a potential second option for an upset where I feel it's applicable. We're going to start with the lower tier categories and work our way up to the bigger ones. So let's get started. Best Documentary Short Film is probably going to go to The Last Repair Shop. I just think the fact that it's a very polished, slickly made film that's both entertaining and poignant will help it a lot. The ABCs of book banning could win it based solely on its political messaging if they feel it's an important enough topic, but I still think The Last Repair Shop takes it. But my personal pick would be Nai Nai and Wei Po, which was really just charming and delightful from start to finish. And I kind of wish more documentary shorts would do something like this and just record a little slice of life, a little time capsule of a moment, instead of always feeling the need to say something important. So yeah, that's my pick for my favorite. Best Live Action Short Film. The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar will probably win, and it should win. This is easily the best short of the group by a country mile. It's visually stunning, it's charming, it's well written, and it's creative. The one thing that could potentially hurt it is that this is a film that's made by professionals, particularly Wes Anderson, who is a very well-known person in the industry, although he has never won an Oscar before, so if this does win, this would be his first Oscar. But the Oscars tend to favor lesser-known filmmakers and directors who are just starting out in this category, trying to give them a leg up in the industry, and that could hurt it here. I don't think it will that much, especially since Anderson has never won before. And if it does lose, I expect it to go to either The After or Red, White, and Blue. Best Animated Short Film. Of the short categories, this is the hardest to predict, and this might be the hardest category to predict, period, because there is no clear frontrunner. There are 3 that could legitimately get it. Letter to a Pig, War is Over, and 95 Senses. This is legitimately a toss-up. I'm hearing some rumblings for War is Over, which I really hope doesn't win because it's the only one that I didn't like. But I think Letter to a Pig is going to squeal out a win here. I think the unique animation plus the Holocaust subject matter will play really well with Oscar voters. But my personal pick would be Pachyderm, a truly haunting, oddly beautiful, but horribly tragic story of a young girl suffering abuse. It is fantastic, and I hope that the director, Stephanie Clement, is given more work in animation in the future. Best Documentary Feature Film. This one I think is pretty easy. 20 Days in Mariupol is going to win, and it should win. It's a powerful documentary about a timely event, and there's no real competition. The only chance for a spoiler here is Bobby Wine, but I don't think it's got any momentum. Best Original Song. The question isn't what movie is winning this category, it's which Barbie song is winning. While I'm Just Ken has a chance of a spoiler, I still think that What Was I Made For is the song that the Oscar voters will go for. It's a much more Oscar-friendly song, and it was popular independent from the film, which also helps. None of the 5 nominees are songs that I personally would listen to on my own, but if I had to pick one for the ballot, I would go with Wazahazi, A Song for My People from Killers of the Flower Moon. Viewed within the context of the film, that's the song that really affected me the most, even if on its own it's a little too long. Best Original Score. This one should be Oppenheimer's to take home, and if I was voting, it would also get my pick. It's a really haunting score that works both in the context of the film and on its own. Best Sound. This one I was saying was wrapped up for months as Oppenheimer's to lose, particularly for the stunning Trinity scene. But then Zone of Interest came on the scene and I don't know, there's some competition there. The Zone of Interest is what it is because of its sound. That's where the film's genius comes from. So if it actually managed to be the underdog and sneak a win here, I wouldn't be terribly surprised. However, because of how massive and mainstream Oppenheimer is compared to the Zone of Interest, I still think Oppenheimer is going to win, but Zone of Interest would get my vote if I had a ballot. Best Production Design. This one's tough. It's a dead heat between either Poor Things or Barbie. People were saying that Barbie had this in the bag for months, but Poor Things has worked its way comfortably into the race. I think the diversity of the sets and production design will help Poor Things here, and it'll probably just barely win. But my personal pick would be for Barbie, simply because Barbie's was just more pleasant to look at. Best Cinematography. Once again, Oppenheimer should win this, and it would also get my vote. Best Makeup and Hairstyling. Of the 5 nominees, I think this is a pretty easy win for Maestro. I don't think it has any serious competition for transforming both Bradley Cooper and Carey Mulligan into these characters as they grow older, and the makeup work is legitimately good. I will give the film credit there. But I personally would go with Society of the Snow for the incredible work of showing the physical deterioration and the pain that the characters go through in order to survive the ordeal. It looks very realistic, and I will give the makeup crew a lot of credit there. Best Costume Design. This is actually the reverse situation for Best Production Design for me. I personally think that Barbie is going to win here for its incredibly varied costume work, many of which were taken from the actual toys. But I actually preferred the costume work in Poor Things more. I thought the costumes were more expressive and creative and full of personality. Best Film Editing. Another no-brainer. Oppenheimer is going to win this one easily. The film's editing is something that people have praised this film for up and down, even though I actually wasn't a big fan of this film's editing. I thought it was a little too choppy and at times kind of difficult to follow. I actually think the editing work in Killers of the Flower Moon was much better, if for no other reason than it actually manages to tell a story that's 3.5 hours long, and yet it feels so tight and compact, which I think is insanely impressive. Best Visual Effects. This one is really difficult for me, both to predict and for what I would vote for. This one comes down to either The Creator or Godzilla Minus One, because it's not a matter of which film I think is better, it's which one has the better visual effects. Now, if you're judging visual effects based on which ones look more realistic, then The Creator would win. But if you're judging it based on how it better serves the story and which effects are more aesthetically pleasing, then I think Godzilla Minus One would win. And I know the temptation to go with Godzilla Minus One because of the lower budget, but it really should go to which one has the better visual effects, not which one had the better visual effects considering its budget. However, I think even if you try to take all of that out of the equation, I personally think that it's going to win. And it is what I would vote for. Simply because it is visual effects that I think are more of a feast on the eyes rather than it being just 100% real. Maybe that's my own bias talking, but that is both my prediction and my pick. Best International Feature Film. Another easy one. Without competition from Anatomy of a Fall, Zone of Interest should win, and it would also get my vote, although Perfect Days is a pretty close second. Best Animated Feature. This one's a battle between two films, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and The Boy and the Heron. People have been saying Spider-Verse was a shoo-in to win since it first came out, and I agreed. But then The Boy and the Heron started winning things and made some people realize maybe Spider-Man doesn't have it in the bag. Now, could Heron win it? Yes, absolutely, it has a shot. However, even though it's lost some momentum, I'm still going to go with Spider-Verse here. The first film won the prize back in 2018. It's a film that did really well at the box office, was praised by pretty much everybody, and plus, it's more kid-friendly compared to Heron, and in the past, they have gone with the film that their kids tended to like more for this category than what was actually the best film. Now, they might be moving away from that mindset very slowly, but even still, I think that Spider-Verse just barely has the edge in this race. And it would also get my vote. I just think it's easily the best film in this category. Best Original Screenplay. This one, I feel, is a battle between two screenplays, The Holdovers and Anatomy of a Fall. Either one of them could win, but I think that Anatomy of a Fall has the edge here. But in terms of which one I would actually pick, this was really hard for me, because a lot of people think it's just which one is your favorite film, but it's really not. It's which one had the strongest characters, the strongest dialogue, flow, thematic richness, all the stuff that goes into a screenplay. And honestly, with the exception of Maestro, this was a really strong category. And I struggled between picking Holdovers, Anatomy of a Fall, May, December, and Past Lives. But ultimately, by the tiniest of margins, I decided that I would vote for May, December simply because of just how incredibly it handled its themes and how delicately it handled such a touchy subject matter. Best Adapted Screenplay. This is probably one of the harder categories to predict because there are three films duking it out for a win here. American Fiction, Barbie, and Oppenheimer. Realistically, any of these three could win. I think a lot of people will be tempted to go with Oppenheimer, especially if they're expecting it to just totally dominate, or Barbie almost as kind of a makeup prize for snubbing Greta Gerwig for Best Director. But I actually think it's going to go to American Fiction. Academy members really responded to it, including giving it a surprise nomination for Best Score. So I think they're going to want to give it something. And realistically, this is the only category it has a shot at winning. And if I had a ballot, it too would also be my pick. Even though I think Zone of Interest is a better film, the script is really not what makes it great. I'm honestly not even sure why it was nominated here. But yeah, even though I had issues with American Fiction, it had some of the smartest satire of the entire year. And I think it's easily the best screenplay of the group. Best Supporting Actor. Another easy call. Robert Downey Jr. won every single precursor he needed to win the Oscar, so he should win easily for his work in Oppenheimer. Now, as to which one I would pick, honestly, I wasn't terribly impressed with this category. Only one of these nominations I felt was actually worth getting a nomination, and it was Robert De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon, so yeah, he would be my pick. Best Supporting Actress. Once again, this is another easy call. Just like Downey Jr., Divine Joy Randolph has swept absolutely every precursor award that she needed to win the Oscar, and I fully expect her to take home her first Oscar for her work in The Holdovers. And she would also get my vote. What a beautiful, subtle, and soulful performance she gave in this film. In the interest of fairness, I haven't seen The Color Purple yet, so I haven't seen Danielle Brooks' performance, so I can't say with 100% certainty that she wouldn't get my vote, but I don't know. I feel pretty confident in saying that Randolph would still be my pick. Best Actor. This race was interesting because for a while it kind of looked like Paul Giamatti could win for his work in The Holdovers, especially after he won at Critics' Choice. But then Cillian Murphy won at BAFTA and SAG, and almost always if you win both, the Oscar is yours. Only twice has the BAFTA and SAG winner lost to the Critics' Choice winner, and both of those were for supporting roles, not lead. And unfortunately, we don't have a head-to-head Golden Globe matchup between Murphy and Giamatti to know for sure who would have won if they'd gone head-to-head. So could Giamatti still win? Sure, but let's be honest, this one's Murphy's to lose for his work in Oppenheimer. He's the clear front-runner. As to which one I would vote for, I was actually really tempted to put Jeffrey Wright at the top of my list. His performance in American Fiction was just so good, but in the end, I had to go with the obvious choice, and Paul Giamatti's performance as the stubborn, curmudgeonly teacher, I really do think is the best of the group. Best Actress. Of the major categories, this one is the hardest to predict, and I think it is a legitimate coin flip between Lily Gladstone and Emma Stone. I think this is going to be a really tight race. A lot of people wrote off Gladstone after she was left out at BAFTA entirely, but then she won at SAG, which gave her the momentum she needed at just the right time. Personally, I think that if Emma Stone hadn't won for La La Land back in 2017, I think she would win here easily. I think she would run away with it. But I think because she's already won and a lot of members might be split on which performance they think is better, simply because they are two very different performances, I think they're going to be tempted to give the Oscar to Gladstone. But make no mistake, Stone could easily still win this. This is far from a definitive outcome. And for my ballot, I would also pick Gladstone. This is actually a really strong group of nominees. Even the Annette Bening nomination I was okay with. And Sandra Hüller is also brilliant and deserves the recognition for that film as well. But even with all that being said, I still think Gladstone's performance is just the best. It is so magnetic and powerful, and she makes you feel the weight of just all this death and destruction around her. Best Director. In terms of predicting, there's absolutely no contest here. Christopher Nolan is winning this one. He has swept every single major award show this season, and this will continue here. This is probably the closest thing to a 100% guarantee that you're going to get. If he lost here, I would be legitimately shocked. However, I personally would not put him on my ballot. Even though it pains me to say it because I love many of Nolan's work so much, and I do want him to get an Oscar, I personally don't think it was the best directed film of the year. I think that honor goes to Jonathan Glazer for his bold and transfixing work for The Zone of Interest. Best Picture. And finally, we come to the top dog prize itself. And what of the 10 films might win? Well, yeah, no surprise, this one's going to Oppenheimer. It's been frontrunner for the entire Oscar season, and I have seen absolutely nothing to indicate anything to the contrary. Potential upsets, I think, could be either The Holdovers, simply because it's a crowd pleaser that also feels like a typical Oscar film, and I think it could get a boost from the preferential voting system, and The Zone of Interest, simply due to it being so unique and different, and it's also about an important subject matter. But yeah, realistically, smart money's on Oppenheimer taking it all. And, as you would expect, I would pick The Holdovers as my favorite film of the year. I mean, it was my favorite film of the year, period, so of course it would get my vote. And finally, before we go, I want to give you my picks for 5 nominees I would change if I had the opportunity, which one I would add in a category, and which one I would take out. My only rule is that I'm only allowed to take out a film once in one category and add in a film once. The first thing I would do is I would take Maestro out of Best Picture. Really, I could take Maestro out of a lot of categories here. But I wanted to take something out of Best Picture, and this was the easy target. There's a lot of potential options for what I would replace it with, but I think I would put Air in its place. Even though there are other films that I think are better, I think it's the one that would be very fitting to be in a Best Picture lineup. The second thing I would do is I would take Sterling K. Brown out of Best Supporting Actor for American Fiction. As I said, I wasn't really the biggest fan of this lineup. I just don't think that most of these are truly fantastic performances. They're not bad, they're just kind of there. And Brown's nomination is the one that baffles me the most. He does just fine with what was asked of him, but I don't think it's Oscar-worthy work. So I would take him out, and I would replace him with Charles Melton for May-December. The third one I would take out is The Zone of Interest for Best Adapted Screenplay. I love The Zone of Interest, but I simply do not get this nomination at all. The script really is not what's great about the film. The directing, the sound work, the editing, the presentation, that's what makes it great. The script is actually pretty sparse. So I would take that nomination out and I would replace it with Killers of the Flower Moon, which that was the biggest and most shocking omission to me. I am genuinely baffled that that film got left out in that category. The fourth one I would take out is Napoleon for Best Visual Effects. This is actually a really strong category overall, but the weak link is Napoleon's nomination. Really, I think Oppenheimer should have been nominated, but it didn't even make the shortlist. So because of that, I'm going to go with the one that I think is the best of the shortlisted ones that didn't make it. And for me, that's a no-brainer. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse should have been nominated for Best Visual Effects instead of Napoleon. And finally, I would take out War Is Over, inspired by the music of John and Yoko, for Best Animated Short Film. There were shorts in the other categories that I liked less than this, but I didn't watch any of the other shortlisted shorts, so I can't really say what I would replace it with without watching any of them. However, in the animated short films, there was an animated short that was shortlisted that I did watch, and it was Once Upon a Studio. Like many others, I was baffled that this didn't get in because I actually thought it was the frontrunner. But I guess the fact that it was essentially a commercial for Disney really hurt it. But that still doesn't change the fact that it's a really good short, certainly a lot better than War Is Over. So that's what I would take out and replace in the Best Animated Short category if I had some arbitrary veto power that the Academy bestowed upon me for some reason. So, did I get anything right? Anything wrong? Let me know what your thoughts in any of these categories and predictions are in the comment section down below. And I'll find out how close I am with my predictions by tonight. But, alright, until then, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and a special thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. The link to that is in the description below. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.